Subscribe to see more stories. Enjoy your viewing.
I never imagined my world would shatter so completely, yet here I stand, grappling with the truth that has unraveled every thread of my once cherished life. My name is David, and until recently, I believed my marriage to Elena was the safe harbor in an otherwise tumultuous sea. That belief, however, was built on fragile foundations. The revelation of Elena's betrayal with a younger man has left me in a state of disbelief and pain, a raw wound that only deepens with each passing day. It started with small, unexplainable changes. Elena began coming home later than usual, her once warm greetings now replaced by an inexplicable distance. I remember sitting alone at our dining table one chilly autumn evening, watching the rain trace sorrowful patterns on the window. Elena's silence was louder than her words, and as I waited for her to speak, a gnawing feeling told me something was horribly wrong. I tried to dismiss the uneasy sensation, convincing myself it was merely a phase, a temporary distraction in an otherwise perfect union. But as the days turned into weeks, the signs grew undeniable. I discovered messages on her phone, brief, impulsive texts, brimming with youthful exuberance. They were from Luke, a man barely out of his 20s, whose name I had only vaguely heard in passing. Each message, laced with flirtation and hidden excitement, was like a small, corrosive acid eating away at the trust one had so carefully built over the years. I felt like an outsider in my own home, trapped in a silent, lonely echo chamber of despair and betrayal. The moment of realization came on a crisp winter morning. I had been tidying up the study when I noticed a receipt tucked away in a folder, a receipt for dinner at a trendy restaurant in town. I recalled Elena mentioning that she would be meeting a friend, but this receipt was from an establishment known for intimate candlelit dinners, not casual get-togethers. My heart pounded, and my hands trembled as I pieced together the fragments of evidence. The thought of Elena with another man, laughing and sharing moments that were meant to be ours, was unbearable. In the days that followed, I oscillated between numbness and raging sorrow. I questioned every memory, every tender moment we had shared. Was I so blind to the signs, or had I simply been too enamored with the idea of a perfect life to notice the cracks forming beneath the surface? The betrayal was not an explosion of fury, it was a slow, creeping poison that had infiltrated every corner of my being. I spent countless nights rereading old letters and reviewing photographs, desperate to find something that would explain what I had missed. Instead, I only found echoes of a love that once was, now tarnished by deceit. One particularly painful evening, I confronted Elena. The living room, usually our sanctuary of shared laughter and whispered dreams, became the setting for an unraveling storm of accusations and defensiveness. I demanded to know why she had strayed, why she had allowed a young man like Luke to infiltrate our life together. Elena's eyes, red-rimmed and distant, held no trace of the warmth they once did. In her hesitant reply, I heard the dull thud of resignation. She confessed that what began as harmless fun had spiraled into a passion she could no longer control. Her voice was soft, almost apologetic, as she admitted that she sought excitement, something fresh and untamed that I could no longer provide. That conversation marked the beginning of an inevitable descent. Every word exchanged, every tear shed, seemed to fortify the growing chasm between us. I was left to wonder if love could ever be reclaimed once betrayed so profoundly. The memories of our shared dreams clashed with the harsh reality of a future tainted by infidelity. How do you reconcile the image of a woman you once adored with the reality of her actions? The answer, I slowly realized, lay in the depths of an aching silence, a silence that screamed louder than any argument. In the solitude of my grief, I began to question my own worth. I replayed moments where Elena had smiled at me, questioning whether there was something lacking in me that had driven her into the arms of another. The internal dialogue was relentless, each thought more damning than the last. Yet, amid this internal storm, there was a spark of clarity, a recognition that the betrayal, however painful, was not a reflection of my inadequacies but rather a symptom of a marriage that had lost its balance. Elena's pursuit of novelty was a decision she made, a choice that left me shattered and alone. Now, as I sit by the window on a bitterly cold night, the remnants of our past life swirl around me like ghosts. The lights of the city flicker in the distance, indifferent to the turmoil raging within my heart. I grasp an old photograph of us, smiling faces frozen in time, and I feel the sting of loss. The realization is as cruel as it is inevitable: our love has been consumed by betrayal. It was a slow burn, a gradual erosion of trust that ultimately left us standing on opposite sides of an insurmountable divide. Despite the anguish, I find a peculiar sense of resolve emerging from the chaos. The pain, while searing, is also a catalyst for change, a force that compels me to seek truth, to reclaim my identity in the aftermath of shattered illusions. I now understand that true love is not measured by the length of time spent together, but by the unwavering commitment to honesty and mutual respect. Elena's choice to chase fleeting excitement has left me with no other option but to confront the reality of our situation head-on. This chapter of my life, marked by loss and betrayal, is only the beginning of a journey towards reclaiming my dignity. I have come to accept that the path to healing is paved with the acknowledgement of harsh truths. The painful lessons learned from Elena's actions will serve as a guide, albeit a bitter one, as I navigate the uncertain road ahead. I do not yet know where this journey will lead me, but I am determined to find a way forward, even if it means walking it alone. The story of my life is now irreversibly altered, the pages stained with the ink of regret and the sorrow of a love betrayed. Yet, in the quiet moments of despair, there is a glimmer of hope, a hope that even in the wreckage of a broken marriage, there lies the possibility of renewal and self-discovery. But for now, the wounds are too fresh, the betrayal too raw. I stand at the precipice of a new beginning, forced to confront the reality that the woman I once loved has chosen a path of infidelity, and in doing so, has sealed the fate of our union. As I close this chapter of my life, I am left with more questions than answers. Elena's decision to seek solace in the arms of a younger man was not just an act of betrayal, it was a catalyst that propelled me into a confrontation with my own vulnerabilities. The echo of that fateful conversation still reverberates in the silence of our now empty home, a constant reminder that love, when tainted by deceit, can only lead to an inevitable, hostile separation. And so, with a heavy heart and a resolve forged in the fires of betrayal, I step into the unknown, uncertain of what lies ahead but determined to reclaim the pieces of a life that was once whole. In the weeks following our painful confrontation, the cold silence between Elena and me grew into an almost palpable barrier that neither of us dared breach. The once familiar corners of our home now felt alien, a place where every shadow and creak whispered of betrayal and regret. I spent many sleepless nights wandering the hallways, my thoughts a tangled mess of anger, sorrow, and the bitter taste of disillusionment. I was no longer just David, a husband, I had become an unwilling witness to the crumbling of what I had once believed was a solid union. Elena, on the other hand, seemed trapped in a vortex of her own making. I would catch her staring blankly into space, as if she were trying to recall fragments of a life that now belonged to someone else. At times, I sensed her remorse, at others, it was a quiet resignation, as if she had already accepted the consequences of her actions. One evening, as I sat alone in the dim light of our living room, I heard the soft clink of a teacup in the kitchen, a sound that used to herald our shared moments of gentle conversation. But that night, it only reminded me of what was lost. The tension between us was not merely the result of a single act of infidelity, it was the culmination of years of neglect, unmet needs, and unspoken desires that had festered beneath the surface. I began to revisit the memories of our early days together, when Elena's laughter would light up every room and our dreams seemed so vibrant and full of promise. How did we reach this point? The question echoed relentlessly in my mind, fueling both my anguish and my determination to understand the truth. In the wake of our prolonged conversations and shared heartache, the silence that enveloped our home grew heavier, laden with unspoken words and unresolved anger. The days following our intense confrontations felt like drifting through a fog of regret and disbelief, a state where the past and present collided in a relentless barrage of memories that neither time nor distance could erase. I found myself caught between clinging to what was left of a shattered past and stepping into an uncertain future that beckoned with both promise and trepidation. My routine became an endless cycle of introspection and reluctant acceptance. Morning started with the stark realization that life, despite its painful upheavals, continued relentlessly. I'd wake to the sound of an alarm, the gray light of dawn filtering through the curtains, and for a few moments, I would allow myself the luxury of dwelling on what had been lost. Each day, however, was punctuated by the constant reminder of our crumbling marriage, a marriage that had once been the cornerstone of my identity, now reduced to mere fragments of memories and echoes of betrayal. In an attempt to make sense of it all, I started seeking solace outside the confines of our home. I frequented the local library, the one place that seemed to whisper wisdom through its rows of well-worn books and quiet study corners. There, amidst the pages of literature and history, I discovered that pain, loss, and the search for redemption were common threads that wove through countless lives. Reading about others' struggles did little to erase my own sorrow, yet it provided a semblance of connection, a reminder that I was not alone in my suffering. Outside the library, the city continued its unyielding pace. The hustle of daily life, with its transient moments of joy and mundane routine, stood in stark contrast to the internal tempest raging within me. I watched as strangers greeted each other on the streets, exchanged smiles, and hurried towards destinations that promised a better tomorrow. Their carefree interactions served as a painful reminder of the warmth and companionship that had long since vanished from my own life. I couldn't help but wonder if the world outside would ever grant me a second chance, a chance to heal, to rebuild, and perhaps, to rediscover the meaning of trust and love. As the days melded into weeks, I began to notice subtle changes in my perspective. The initial shock and anger, which had once threatened to consume every fiber of my being, gradually gave way to a quieter resolve. I realized that clinging to the past was not only futile but also a barrier to my own healing. In the quiet corners of my mind, a newfound determination started to take root, a resolve to reclaim my identity and rediscover the passions and dreams that had been buried under the weight of betrayal. This internal transformation was not without its setbacks. There were moments when the memories of Elena's laughter and the echoes of our happier times would surge forth unexpectedly, leaving me vulnerable and exposed. In those moments, I would retreat into solitude, grappling with the raw emotions that threatened to overwhelm me. Yet, each time I emerged from that dark place, I carried with me a small, albeit significant, piece of newfound strength. I started dedicating time to my old hobbies, painting and writing, activities that had once given me immense joy and solace. With every brushstroke on a blank canvas or every word penned in a journal, I felt the shackles of my sorrow loosen ever so slightly. Despite my personal progress, the practicalities of life continued unabated. Bills piled up, responsibilities awaited my attention, and the mundane tasks of everyday living became a constant reminder of the life I still had to lead. I tried to keep my focus on these tasks, finding a strange comfort in the order and predictability they offered. Amid this routine, however, the reality of Elena's choices lingered like an unhealed wound. Every knock on the door, every unexpected phone call, seemed to reopen that wound, a stark reminder of the life we once shared, now irrevocably marred by betrayal. I attempted to engage in conversations with Elena, hoping that, beneath the veneer of our mutual hurt, there might still exist a spark of the old connection. But our interactions had devolved into formal exchanges, devoid of the intimacy and understanding that once defined our relationship. Even shared meals were now awkward affairs, punctuated by long pauses and the weight of what was unsaid. It became painfully clear that the trust we had once nurtured was beyond repair. The woman I had loved, and whom I had envisioned a lifetime with, was now a stranger defined by her pursuit of ephemeral excitement and the consequent shattering of our shared dreams. In these moments of solitude, I began to reconcile with the inevitability of our separation. The idea of parting ways, though still wrapped in pain and uncertainty, started to emerge as a necessary step towards healing. The notion that our paths, once so intricately intertwined, might need to diverge was a bitter pill to swallow. Yet, deep down, I understood that true healing could only come when both of us embraced the reality of our circumstances, accepting that the bridge of trust had been burned beyond repair. One particularly cold evening, as I walked along the empty streets bathed in the pale glow of streetlights, the finality of our situation became unmistakable. The city, in all its indifferent beauty, seemed to mirror the desolation within me, a quiet acceptance that nothing would ever be the same. I stopped by the riverbank, watching as the water flowed relentlessly onward, its current a metaphor for the unstoppable march of time and change. In that moment, the realization crystallized: holding on to the remnants of a broken union was not a tribute to what we once had, but rather a hindrance to what we both deserved, a chance at renewal and growth. The process of disentangling my life from the shadows of our past was a slow, painful journey. It involved difficult conversations, quiet farewells, and the acceptance of an ending that, while sorrowful, was inevitable. I began to draft plans for a future that did not include the constant reminder of betrayal, a future where I could rebuild my life, piece by fragile piece. With each passing day, I grew more certain that our marriage, marked by the scars of infidelity and the erosion of trust, had reached its end. Now, as I reflect on the aftermath of everything that transpired, I feel a profound sense of loss, tempered by the understanding that some relationships are not meant to withstand every storm. Elena's actions, driven by a desire for fleeting pleasure, have left an indelible mark on my soul, one that will take time to heal. The journey towards recovery is just beginning, and while the wounds may never completely disappear, I am slowly learning to accept the painful truth: our love story has become a cautionary tale of misplaced desire and irrevocable betrayal. In the quiet solitude of my current existence, I continue to move forward with a resolve that, though fragile, is resolute. The bitter aftertaste of our past lingers, but it no longer defines me. Instead, it serves as a stark reminder of the cost of lost trust and the importance of self-respect. As I stand on the precipice of a future free from the chains of our shared sorrow, I embrace the uncertainty that lies ahead. The road to healing is long, but it is one I must walk alone, a journey towards a life where the echoes of betrayal are gradually replaced by the promise of new beginnings. The days leading to the final confrontation seem to stretch endlessly, each minute a reminder that nothing could mend the shattered fragments of what we once called a marriage. I felt as though I were caught in an inescapable limbo, where every recollection of our shared past clashed violently with the harsh reality of our present. The anticipation of our final parting gnawed at me, a mixture of anger, sorrow, and a reluctant relief that the inevitable end was finally here. It was a chilly autumn evening when the tension between us reached its breaking point. The house, once filled with laughter and shared dreams, had become a cold battleground where every room echoed with memories of happier times, now turned bitter by betrayal. I had spent the better part of the day preparing myself for the confrontation. In the solitude of my study, I reviewed all the moments we had lived together, their beauty and their imperfections, knowing that nothing could bring them back, nor could they justify the pain of infidelity. Elena appeared in the doorway of our living room, her eyes tired and distant. There was a guarded air about her, as if she already knew that words would soon be exchanged that could never be taken back. The silence between us was thick, charged with a volatile mix of regret and resentment. I took a deep breath, summoning the resolve I had built over these long months of introspection and anguish. "Elena," I began, my voice steadier than I felt, "we need to talk. This cannot go on any longer." She shifted uncomfortably, her gaze falling to the floor. For a long moment, the room remained mute, save for the distant hum of the city outside our window. Finally, she replied in a tone that was neither defensive nor conciliatory. "I know," she said softly, her voice carrying a hint of resignation. "We both know this is the end." Those words, spoken with such quiet finality, stirred a maelstrom of emotions within me. It was as if every suppressed thought, every bitter memory, surged forth in that moment. I recalled the nights I had spent awake, wrestling with feelings of inadequacy, and the countless hours I had attempted to rationalize her choices. But now, all the excuses and justifications fell away, leaving nothing but raw truth. I walked over to the table where we had once shared breakfast, each step a painful reminder of the life we had built together. I tried to understand, I said, more to myself than to her. I tried to salvage what we had. But every effort, every word exchanged, only reopened wounds that I can no longer bear. Elena's eyes shimmered with unshed tears, but there was a steely resolve behind them. "David, I never meant to hurt you," she murmured, her voice cracking under the weight of guilt. "I wanted something different, a spark, an excitement that I thought I was missing. But I see now that in seeking that, I've destroyed what we had." Her confession, though expected, cut deeper than any accusation I could have made. It was a final admission that we had drifted irreparably apart. The realization that the person I once loved was now a stranger, defined by her need for something fleeting and transient, was a bitter pill to swallow. I felt the years of trust and shared dreams collapse, leaving behind a hollow space filled only with resentment. As the conversation unfolded, our voices began to rise, first with hurt, then with anger, and finally with the rawness of betrayal. I accused her of throwing away the sanctity of our bond for a momentary thrill. "How could you do this, Elena?" I demanded, my voice trembling with a mixture of fury and despair. "How could you betray everything we built, everything we promised each other?" Elena's response was a mixture of defensiveness and regret. "It wasn't about you or our life," she insisted, her tone rising as much as mine. "It was about me, my desire to feel alive, to experience something new. I was lost, and I made a choice that I now regret. But I can't change what I did." Her words, meant to justify her actions, only deepened the chasm between us. The more she tried to explain, the more it became clear that our worlds had irreversibly diverged. In that heated moment, I realized that forgiveness, if it were ever to come, would not be enough to bridge the gap of broken trust. The love that had once been the foundation of our lives was now replaced by a bitter animosity, a recognition that what we had was beyond repair. In the midst of our escalating argument, memories of our happier times flashed before my eyes, the quiet mornings spent together, the promises made in whispered tones, the dreams we had nurtured in the safety of our embrace. Those memories, now tainted by the reality of betrayal, became weapons that cut even deeper. With every word exchanged, the warmth that had once defined our relationship dissipated further, leaving only the cold finality of an ending that had been long in the making. The culmination of our argument came as a sudden, mutual silence, a silence so profound it roared louder than any of our words. I looked at Elena, and in that gaze, I saw not the woman I had loved, but a reflection of a life marked by irreversible mistakes. It was then that I knew, with a painful clarity, that our paths must now diverge. The fight was no longer about blame or justification, it was about survival, about preserving what little dignity we had left as we stepped away from the ruins of our past. "I can't do this anymore," I finally said, my voice barely above a whisper, yet carrying the full weight of my resolve. "I refuse to keep living in the shadow of what you've done. I'm done trying to fix something that's irreparably broken." Elena's eyes filled with tears, but her posture stiffened, a final act of defiance. "If that's what you want, then I suppose it's time to end this, once and for all," she replied, her tone a mix of sorrow and bitter acceptance. With those words, the finality of our situation was sealed. We sat in silence for what felt like an eternity, each of us grappling with the inevitability of the end. The storm of emotions had subsided, replaced by a cold, unmistakable understanding that we were now adversaries in the aftermath of a love that had once meant everything. In that moment, our shared history, filled with both light and darkness, was reduced to nothing more than a battleground of broken promises and irreparable wounds. That night, as I packed a single bag and gathered the remnants of a life we had built together, I felt a mix of sorrow and a grim satisfaction. I was leaving not just a home, but a chapter of my life that was irrevocably tainted by betrayal. With each item I placed into the bag, I symbolically shed the layers of trust and hope that had been eroded over time. The finality of it all was overwhelming, the realization that our marriage, once a source of solace and joy, had transformed into a bitter testament to lost faith and shattered dreams. As I stepped out into the cold night, the sound of the door closing behind me resonated like a death knell. The finality of our parting was not marked by tears or declarations of undying love, but by a hostile silence, a mutual agreement that it was time to sever the ties that once bound us together. The hostile separation was complete, a painful yet necessary end to a relationship that had been poisoned by the pursuit of momentary thrills and the abandonment of shared values. Now, as I walk away from the remnants of a life that once promised so much, I carry with me the lessons of our painful journey. I have learned that love, when it is built on mutual respect and trust, can endure the tests of time. But when that trust is broken, when betrayal overshadows every promise made, the only path forward is to reclaim oneself, even if that means parting ways in a storm of hostility and sorrow. The finality of our separation is a harsh reminder that some bonds, once severed, can never be mended. I move forward into an uncertain future, determined to rebuild my life from the ruins of our broken union. And as I take my first steps into a life defined by the resolve to never again sacrifice my self-worth, I leave behind the ghost of a love that was, and the bitter memory of a betrayal that will forever haunt the echoes of our past. I resolve to confront not only Elena but also the painful reality that her betrayal with Luke had forced me to face. The name Luke became a constant presence in my thoughts, a symbol of the youthful allure and reckless abandon that had seduced her. I recalled the moment when I first learned about his existence, a moment that had shattered my sense of security and transformed my understanding of the person I once loved. The discovery was not just about an affair, it was about the unraveling of a life I had built together with someone who had now become a stranger. Determined to make sense of the chaos, I sought answers in the quiet corners of my own heart. I took long walks through the city, the cold wind a constant reminder of the emptiness that had settled within me. In those solitary journeys, I began to notice how the bustling life around me contrasted sharply with the stillness of my inner turmoil. Families laughed in the parks, lovers strolled hand in hand, and the world moved on with a steady rhythm, oblivious to the tragedy unfolding behind closed doors. One rainy afternoon, as I wandered near the old waterfront district where we had once shared so many cherished memories, I encountered a small, weathered cafe. Its windows were fogged up, the warm light spilling onto the wet pavement like a gentle invitation. I sat at a corner table, the drizzle tapping softly on the glass, and allowed my mind to wander freely. I thought about the choices that had led us here, the missed opportunities to communicate, the unspoken resentments that had built up over time, and the fateful decision Elena made to seek excitement in the arms of another. That day, I resolved to seek closure. I penned a long letter to Elena, pouring out all the emotions that had been bottled up inside me. In that letter, I recounted the memories of our better days, the moments of joy that had once defined our relationship, and the stark contrast with the betrayal that now loomed over us. I wrote of my pain, my anger, and my desperate need to understand why she had chosen this path. It was a cathartic exercise, a way for me to externalize the turmoil that had been consuming me from within. Yet, even as I wrote, I knew that words could never fully capture the depth of the betrayal or the complexity of our shared past. Elena eventually read the letter in silence, a silence that spoke volumes. The next day, when I found her in the garden, the normally vibrant blooms appeared dull and lifeless, mirroring the desolation in our hearts. She admitted that the letter stirred feelings she had long tried to bury. "David," she said softly, "I never meant for things to spiral this far. I thought I was just having a little fun, something harmless, but I see now how much I've hurt you." Her words, though laced with regret, did little to alleviate the burning anger that still smoldered inside me. Instead, they served as a stark reminder that the damage was irrevocable. Our ensuing conversations were a turbulent blend of remorse and recrimination. We talked late into the night, each word a double-edged sword that cut deeper than the last. Elena revealed that her encounter with Luke had been more than just a fleeting moment of excitement. It was a collision of desires and fantasies that had overwhelmed her, leaving her disoriented and regretful in its wake. I listened in stunned silence, each detail adding another layer of hurt to my already fragile heart. The revelation was as if I were reading a script of a life I no longer recognized, a life that had been rewritten without my consent. In those moments, I began to understand that our relationship had become a battleground of unmet expectations and irreconcilable differences. Elena's need for novelty clashed violently with my desire for stability and trust. The more we talked, the more it became evident that our love was no longer a partnership built on mutual respect and shared dreams. It had become a series of painful compromises, each one eroding the foundation of what we once had. As the days turned into a blur of conversations and silent stares, I realized that our attempts to salvage the remnants of our relationship were futile. Every attempt at reconciliation only unearthed deeper wounds, every discussion left behind more questions than answers. The love we had once nurtured with care was now replaced by a mutual understanding that we had grown apart, an understanding that, despite our best efforts, some bonds are too deeply fractured to be mended. I spent long hours reflecting on the past and the choices that had led us to this crossroads. The more I thought about it, the more I recognized that the answer was not to seek revenge or to cling to memories of what might have been. It was to acknowledge that the person I once loved had changed, and that clinging to the illusion of our former happiness was only prolonging my suffering. The clarity came with a heavy heart. Our relationship, tainted by betrayal and unmet desires, had reached a point where the only solution was to part ways. Now, as I sit in the quiet of an overcast afternoon, I understand that the reckoning has begun. I am no longer the man who once believed in the sanctity of our love without question. I have been forced to confront the harsh realities of a relationship where loyalty was betrayed by the lure of fleeting excitement. The chapter of our marriage is drawing to a close, and with each passing day, the finality of our situation becomes more undeniable. In the midst of this internal storm, I find a strange sense of resolve, a determination to move forward, even as the memories of what we once had continue to haunt me. I know that healing will not come easily, and that the scars of betrayal will remain as a permanent reminder of the pain we endured. But with that understanding, I also see the possibility of a future unburdened by the weight of deception, a future where I can rediscover who I am without the shadow of past betrayals. Elena's pursuit of a brief thrill with a younger man has irrevocably altered the course of our lives. And while I stand at the brink of an uncertain future, I do so with the conviction that I must reclaim my life piece by piece, even if it means accepting that some loves are meant to end. The journey ahead is daunting, but it is a journey toward a life where trust, once shattered, may one day be rebuilt, not with false promises, but with a renewed commitment to self-respect and honest living.